A warm welcome to everyone here for a special edition of Vision and Light. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We have a few time zones being displayed today. Now we're having this Zoom call because there's a new photo contest on the market, and it's very different from pretty much anything else that's out there. So this is what we're going to do today, is talk to this, and you're basically looking at the people whose brainchild it is, and I am fortunate enough to have been asked to be on the judging panel, so we're all connected with it quite closely. So welcome everybody.
Thank you, Alistair. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. We really appreciate you having us, and obviously we're super grateful to have you on board as a judge as well.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Right, so you know, the world is overflowing with photography contests these days. It's quite a well-recognized thing. Why does the world need another? Who wants to come in on that first?
Matt?
Oh. Yeah, I'll be happy to dive right in. You know, I think the genesis of this particular competition revolves around kind of a shared understanding among the four of us that we want to value and celebrate the type of landscape and nature photography that we all appreciate and that we all like to engage in, which kind of centers around images that are kind of just more natural, you know, with some, you know, without overdoing the editing process. You know, we all like to know that what we're looking at is what that person actually experienced. And when I look at photographs that I really like and really appreciate, I'm deeply connected to the experience that that person had when they created that image. And so what I have been seeing is that in the existing marketplace, that wasn't the type of images that was being celebrated. And so I felt like there was a need for creating something where people like us have something that we can throw our hat into, where the playing field is leveled and we all know what is allowed and what is not allowed, and that it's very even, and may the best person win. So that's really how it started for me. And I know, interestingly, and I don't want to speak for Tim, but I think it was very interesting. I think Tim had the almost identical thought process at the exact same time as me. And so I had reached out to Tim and said, hey, I heard you also are thinking about this thing. And then that's how this all got started. So maybe Tim, you want to maybe talk about your side of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, on all the photographers that I know and learn my photography from, people like Colin Pryor and Joe Cornish and David Ward, a lot of them work with film. So you had this innate connection with what you saw was what was recorded on a piece of celluloid. And a few of the competitions I was judging, and a little bit of background, I also judged the Wildlife Photographer of the Year, or I do the technical judging for it, and I do a little bit of the aesthetic judging occasionally on the landscape category. And I've also judged a few of the competitions before. And the one thing about the Wildlife Photographer of the Year was always that it had a rigorous checking process for whether the photograph was a representative of what was being in front of the camera at the time. And it's because the Wildlife Photographer of the Year is part of the Natural History Museum, and wildlife photography is about conservation, there needs to be a connection there. And that was always a nice place for people who were taking photographs of that sort to enter their landscape photographs. And last year, they stopped doing a landscape category. And I'd always chatted with people like Alex and other people about, well, you know, we should start a landscape photography competition. Nobody else is doing it. It'd be great to do it, to look at judging in a different way and to arrange categories in a different way. But we always thought, well, there's competitions out there that do it quite well. However, once the Wildlife Photographer of the Year stopped doing landscape categories in the same way, I thought, yeah, why not? if nobody else is going to do it, and there's a space in there, and there's no representation for these sorts of photographs, I thought it would be a good idea. And then I was chatting with Alex about it, and he mentioned that Matt was having the same thoughts. So he said, have a chat with Matt. And we got on well, had very similar ideas. And I think you'd been chatting with Rajesh about it, Matt. And it was nobody else is going to do it. We're in a good position to do it. We're running either side of the Atlantic. We've both got respective audiences, relationships with photographers, etc.
So do you think that, I mean, because one thing that's really happening is that popularity has driven landscape photography down an avenue where certain locations under certain times of the year, and then, you know, if you're serendipitous enough to jump in there on an incredible event, an incredible light event, or a meteor shower, or, you know, auroras and all of that type of thing, my kind of feeling is it became a bit of a, I'll use the word pissing contest, just into outdoing each other. And it was a bit of one-upmanship and things like that. And it just became very competitive to my mind. And I pulled back completely from that style of photography after about 2015, just because I didn't want to have to spend 10 hours in front of the computer every time I wanted to make a photograph. So is it very much a reaction to that sort of popularization of certain locations and certain styles of photography, that we're trying to create something that has a sort of, like you say, it's more of a, as Joe Cornish would put it, a sort of an eyewitness experience, and the photograph is more of a reflection of what actually happened at that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a big feature of what we're trying to do. I mean, of course, a lot of those images are actually quite hard to filter out, as it were. I mean, obviously, our goal is not to reject any particular style of imagery. But I think if you're a judge, it can be really difficult when you're presented with these incredible scenes not to think, oh, that's a great photo, particularly if you're going through hundreds or even thousands of images, trying to find images that effectively stand out. And I think that's where Tim comes into to a large degree with the experience of judging, and knowing how that process can actually affect the results.
It is. I mean, I should say I'm also a judge of the International Landscape Photographer of the Year, which is a no holds barred contest. There is no limits on what you can do in terms of Photoshop or other tools. And that's great. There's a place for that, and quite a few competitions allow as much editing as you like. And when I judge that, I'm in a different mode of thinking. I'm looking for images that look real, that give me an experience. I can't tell whether those images actually are real or not, quite often. So, and that doesn't really matter. In the context of the competition, that's absolutely fine. But I think if you want a competition where that does become part of the ingredients, as it were, then you need to have some rule checking, which is where the Wildlife Photographer of the Year was a good example. And I think there's other competitions that do similar things, but they tend to be in the wildlife category, such as GDT in Germany.
So where's the line between taking the moral high ground and allowing sort of inclusiveness in the process as well? You know, because this is the thing that is the balance point, is sort of saying this isn't some elitist type of thing. So, you know, what's the kind of what's the spectrum of photographer that we're really looking to attract to this competition?
I think we're actually aiming for almost every photographer out there. I mean, I think, you know, with regards to competitions, because of that mechanism that I just mentioned, I think a lot of these fantastical images do get pushed to the fore, and social media has that kind of mechanism too, where outstanding images get seen more easily by everybody else. But I think most photographers still do practice. I mean, especially the photographers that I know do practice in that very natural way. So, I mean, I'm not sure that the competition is an exclusion competition. It's really quite inclusive. And I think even those photographers who have taken images that would break our rules are also producing a huge body of work that wouldn't break those rules at all. And you know, we've been happy taking on judges who have done quotes rule breaking things before, and we've all done that from time to time ourselves.
I didn't know I needed to have a lawyer present for this.
Yeah.
It is hard.
Yeah,
It's hard to come up with a criteria that says this is included or this is excluded.
Yeah, so I think, you know, like what Alex said, you know, we're looking to be welcoming to every skill level, and for somebody who's keen on improving their photography and is looking for validation of their work from the best of the best in the world. You know, there are not many competitions with this kind of a judging panel that, you know, you all have agreed to be on. That itself is a huge, huge factor.
I mean, certainly from my point of view, when I was asked to be involved, it was a huge honor, you know, looking at the names of the other judges alone. I mean, they're all people who I have a huge amount of admiration for. So I was quite humbled. And, you know, obviously slipping Tim Parkin 100 quid obviously helped. But always helps. In terms of what's the main thing that we're aiming for in the photography? Because, you know, a lot of eyewitness photography, I think we're so conditioned now to impact on the photography that we look at an awful lot of the time. I mean, you can't scroll through Insta without just seeing images filled with tons of impact. Is it where, because impact is still a really important aesthetic, I guess. So I guess what we're looking for is people who are taking photographs that are impactful and thoughtful, but retain that level of authenticity. Is that about right?
Yeah, what I would say to that is, you know, I think I want to dispel the myth that this is about presenting images that are straight out of camera, right? We all understand as, you know, relatively experienced photographers that, you know, a good to great photograph does require some artistic interpretation on the part of the photographer. And so first, I just want to dispel that myth. Like, you know, there's plenty of editing techniques that we find to be completely acceptable. This is mostly about wanting to see images that are original, that are creative, that are personally expressive, and that do have that emotional impact that you're describing, Alistair, but that also represent the subject that the photographer was capturing at the time and moment that they were there. And I think often what we find that's being popularized in the current zeitgeist of landscape and nature photography are kind of these hyper realistic photographs that don't necessarily represent that last piece, the moment that was actually experienceable to the photographer, and therefore, but through translation, through the photography, experienceable by the viewer. And that's really what we want to celebrate is photography that has that type of impact, that has that connection to nature. I think one of the other things that, and I think Tim can maybe expand on this piece, but one of the other things that I think is really important, especially around landscape and nature photography, at least for me, and I think for the rest of the judges or the rest of the organizers as well, is its ability to connect us with the reality of nature and to celebrate what is actually there and what is actually experienceable, because that's so important for causes of conservation and understanding what these places actually look like and what it's like to be there at certain times of the day or at different moments. So I think the type of images that we want to see are conveying those types of things. What would you add to that, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we've had the majority of people in the world have grown up with pictures maybe from National Geographic or the Sierra Club, or in the UK, maybe pictures from David Naughton, Joe Cornish, Paul Wakefield. And they have an inherent trust that these pictures are real. They are showing us real things. So much so that when the National Geographic moved a pyramid on the front of their pictures, there was a huge fuss about it nationwide about, is this what's happening to photography? And can we trust what we're seeing again? And that's really at the bottom end of what we're trying to get to and when the Wildlife Photographer of the Year, and I'll go back to them again because a lot of my thoughts about judging came from helping with the competition. they were starting to come up with a set of rules about what you can and can't do. You know, you can use dodging and burning, you can't clone. And cloning for them was a big thing, I mean, understandably. But instead of having all these rules, we decided to come up with a bottom line, which was, does the final result in any way, or could the viewer be deceived by the final result had they seen the original raw file or experienced the original scene? And if the viewer could feel deceived or would feel deceived, then that picture doesn't meet the criteria we want for the competition. That doesn't mean the photographer is trying to deceive. It's a different definition, as it were. So we want things where people look and go, wow, that person's gone into the field, become a great photographer in terms of their field craft and use of the camera, and captured a moment and interpreted that moment in a way without changing it.
I think you brought up a wonderful point there, because I mean, we're all online, we're all on social media. We see debates raging as soon as someone mentions the word composite or digital art or, implied trust or implied contract of authenticity and things like that. Because I've heard it said many, many times, oh, well, viewers know when they're being deceived. And I dispute that completely. I think if it's done well, people don't know. Yeah. I mean, I've made photographs with skies from other places, dropped in behind mountains, turning sunsets into sunrises, changing the direction of the light, putting auroras in all over the place, just because you can. And I think part of that growth as an artist is to push boundaries and to explore avenues of creativity. And it's a perfectly acceptable thing to do. But I do believe that there is an implied contract of trust in a photograph. And I think when people scroll through their social media feeds, there is a belief that what they're seeing is a representation of a moment that somebody has experienced somewhere in the world, and we're somehow fortunate enough to be there and experience that. So something I think I'm very excited about being involved in this project is that feeling that when people look through the galleries of images, when it's all done and dusted, is to know that these are real photographs experienced by real people in real moments. And I think the thing that Matt was saying just then about to be aware of conservation and environmental protection and climate change and all of these massive issues that are affecting society, and the whole COVID pandemic and us all being locked down and limited to travel and blah, 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 blah. It's important, I think, at the moment that we do value the time that we have in the landscape with that level of authenticity. So yeah, I'm well into this, actually. I'm very excited to be involved.
I think it is important. I mean, if you were doing an environmental campaign, such as maybe the one that Elliot Porter did, trying to save some of the canyons in America, it wouldn't have had the impact it had if those pictures were a distortion of what was actually there. If people found out that the pictures are actually made up, or there were composites taken from two different places, I imagine a lot of that campaign would lose all its power. So some of what is important in the environmental campaigning and the use of landscape photography for that, and that is a great use of landscape photography, we know that, is that level of trust. And it's one aspect of photography. Obviously, photography can be lots of different things, but one of the real powers of photography that differentiates it from all other art forms is that connection, that innate movement of light from a subject hitting a sensor or a piece of film. And it's real. It's an interpretation through a camera, but it's a direct interpretation, moderated, that people understand. And people will say, oh, well, a wide-angle lens doesn't tell the truth, or a fisheye doesn't tell the truth. But I think anybody who's a photographer understands how lenses work. They don't think when somebody's using a fisheye that people's heads are actually round and etc. So most people understand and are familiar with how photography works.
So what's the process for people getting involved? What's the kind of timeline of rollout? And am I right? Is it 1st of June as entries are opening, 1st of June? But you've got a pre-sign up thing going on at this moment in time.
Yeah, what we're really pushing for right now is to get people on our mailing list, because the people that are on our mailing list will be given a discount code to be able to use for early bird discounts. And those are going to be fairly significant discounts. And those will be usable for basically the first week that we open for the competition on June 1st. And then after that, the prices will go up, and yeah, and then we're hoping to be closing it down. I believe in end of September is when we're ending submissions, and then the judging process will kick into full gear.
When you start work, Alistair.
That's my Christmas stuffed. And so, this is its first year. It's from my understanding, it's not a money gathering exercise at this point in time.
Oh, who said that?
No.
My wife and I were planning to go retire in the campaign.
Not mentioning fees and stuff like that. But so, what's apart from having a photo contest where we're hoping to celebrate, I hesitate to use the word real photography, but the sort of authenticity of experiential photography. What are we trying to achieve with all this? What's the end game? I mean, there is there a big picture? As things roll out year on year, are things going to build? Is it going to be a book? Is there?
Yeah, so I can touch on.
I'll jump in, Matt.
Do it.
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is we're actually trying to be ambitious this first year, which is part of the reason why we're trying to get these early signups, is because we want to produce a fine art book, and we really want to create that profile for the competition so that people entering feel like there's, that it really counts for something. Because of course we could run a competition with 10 entries and just pick the best person, and that would all be well and good. But actually we need the number of entries to really make the competition what it could be. And I think a major goal for this first year is to have a really high quality fine art book of the images, which of course a lot of competitions already do produce, but we're hoping to bring a higher level of production to that. And hopefully with the judges we've selected and the different categories we have and the rules we have, we should be able to create quite a coherent book from completely disparate parts of the world and different photographers showing different styles, but which have that common theme in terms of the editing, at least. So I think there's a lot of potential there to create quite an exciting book, and that's maybe the first goal, but maybe Matt can talk about into the future.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch a little bit more on the book, I think one of our goals for that, as you were saying, is to produce something that's incredibly high end, fine art with a nice, canvas cover type of a thing. And ideally, we have some financial projections that would make it to where we could provide that book to pretty much anyone who enters at our highest level at the cost. So, we want to make the book something that is kind of given back to the community that's helping us get this off the ground. And we would love for this to become a perennial event that celebrates this type of photography, and it celebrates the photographers and the artists that are creating this type of work that we admire. One of my major goals is to give a voice to some of these kind of unsung heroes of this style of photography that I feel like are kind of being drowned out a little bit by the current social media, what we see on social media, what's popular. I think this all started back with 500px and the popular page of 500px, and we started to see like a nuclear arms race of how do I make the photograph look insane enough to get on the front page of 500px, and we've just seen it grow and grow and grow from there on Instagram. And I think the people that produce stuff that's a little bit more representative of natural experiences that they've had, those types of images have kind of been overshadowed to some degree. And I think what I'd like to see is just a place where those types of images are really celebrated and given voice. What else would you add to that, you guys?
I definitely want to try and promote originality as well, not just in terms of composition and location, but there is quite often a way, and I should say that this arms race has been going on for a long time. I don't know if you remember the Athena posters from the UK that used to be you used to go into bookshops and get these massive folding arrays of posters, and they would just have the pictures of Everest and the Grand Canyon, etc. So it's not a new thing that people want to see these sorts of pictures. But one of the things I've noticed in a lot of competitions, and I think it's not just the people submitting work, but I think it's the way that the judges approach how they select pictures and how they're briefed to select pictures, is a huge amount of photographs coming from Iceland, Patagonia. Those two places would probably represent a third of all submissions, I would imagine. And then there's a few places in the central North America, in Badlands, and we're looking for something that's more original. So if there's two pictures that are both excellent and one's from a location that none of us have seen before and the judges really haven't seen, we would hope that that would be the chosen picture. That's our goal. I want to see a representation of pictures that really make me think and go, wow, okay, I've seen something new here, not just in the way it's presented, but where it's from, how it's composed.
So how is the voting and the judging going to roll out then? So people are going to submit all their images. We end up with a closing date of everything shut down. How involved in the process are you guys, and how involved are the rest of us on the panel involved? How's that going to work?
Who wants
to leave that to Tim?
Yeah. I think that's a Tim question. Yeah.
The first round, because there are a lot of pictures in the first round, there is going to be a pre-selection a judging set. So we'll go through and we'll say, bring them down by maybe 1 in 4. So we'll choose 1 in 4 of the pictures to bring the numbers down. And that will still give, thousands of pictures. We will give those a vague ranking. And if any of the other photographers want to come in and look at what we've chosen at that point in time to say, actually, can we prioritize this in the final selection? They're free to do so, but then we're not going to force them to look through thousands and thousands of pictures. Once we've got through that and we get down to a selection that maybe 2,000 or 3,000, we can bring those through and we'll send an email back to the people who've submitted them saying, can we have the raw file and a little bit of information and your final high-res TIFF.
Okay.
At that point in time, we'll bring everything together into Lightroom. We'll do the raw checking, and we'll all go through and check, say, okay, are these passing our general criteria of does it look vaguely like the raw file, or have we got something completely different? And I've done that a few times for the Wildlife Photographer of the Year, and mostly it's quite quick. A lot of photographs aren't that far away. Some of them you might be taking a point of view whereby this is borderline. If it's borderline, then we'll pass it through to the judges, because we can't say what is definitely going to be rejected and what is going to be passed. It's really, that's the zeitgeist. That's the judging panel are there to decide what goes and what doesn't go. We'll give them the information about what maybe has changed in the picture, and they can look at the raw file to take a look as well. At that point in time, we'll have a big Lightroom catalog with maybe 1,000 or 2,000 pictures, and we can send that out to all the judges remotely, and they can use Lightroom, hopefully a piece of software they're familiar with, and they can try and break that down into a subset of a few hundred. And everybody does that. And then the final step is to bring all those together and pick out a final selection of, say, 200, and get together on Zoom like this and have panels where we go through each category, trying to decide what might be the winner. We'll know which 2 or 3 are the best selected ones from how we've got the feedback from the first rounds. But I think it's quite often important for the judges to get together and chat about these things, because I know I've been there in the Wildlife Photographer of the Year, and you get a picture that hasn't done particularly well, but one judge talks about it and says why they think it's good. And quite often the other judges will go, yeah, you're right, actually. That is interesting. So that process can be quite useful. And that's, in the Wildlife Photographer of the Year, that process takes 4 days. But they've got, they're £1 million turnover business, so they can afford that. So hopefully we'll do that over a couple of days.
Right.
First day to try and reduce it down, and the second day to really sit there and think about which one's the winner and which one's the runner-up in each category. And along the way, we hope to brief the judges in what we find important. So think about originality, think about composition. It's not just that instant selection. So if there's a quiet image, give it a chance. Don't just immediately knock it out. Go back and look at it, which is why we want to give people the catalogue in advance of coming together for the final judging.
Right.
And then we'll have a winner. It'll be great.
Exciting. I'm truly honored to be part of this thing. And I mean, of course, I didn't realize it was that much work,
Yeah, you need to set aside the entire month of September, I think.
I know.
We'll
You need to send back that £100, Tim.
Yeah.
Real quick correction to what Tim said at the very beginning. I think you meant if the judges want to be involved in the pre-judging, then they're welcome to, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah, we'll make all the pictures available. Some of the judges won't have the time to do it. We are, if we get the number of submissions we want to, all the judges are getting paid a good fee, but we can't guarantee that to begin with. So,
well, that's news to me.
Yeah, it would be nice, wouldn't it, if you got paid?
Oh wow!
But yes, I'm hoping that we can't buy you another guitar. I don't think. Not at your prices.
These are quite expensive.
Yeah.
Don't tell.
Doesn't she edit these for you?
Oh, bugger. I forgot about that. It's okay, Anne. They're really cheap guitars. What was I going to say? Yeah, the thing that I'm most passionate about, I mean, I haven't made a photograph since February, the beginning of February. I just haven't been out with my camera. I just haven't felt creatively inspired to do so at all. It was almost as if COVID pandemic lockdown has just sucked out the creativity from me. But what I'm finding is that through conversations like this and then other things that I'm involved in, photography means more to me than just the photograph at the end of the day. It's like we've talked about. I was out for 3 hours hiking this morning in the hills around here. And as soon as you're outside, you feel your mood lift. You feel your whole day just improves and all of the news just washes away and you're in your kind of good place again. And I think the beauty of this type of competition is that it is so inclusive, because I think the initial impression, like we touched on at the start, was, it might be easy for people to say, oh, well, it's kind of an exclusive club type of thing, because it's all the fancy images that are getting kind of brushed to one side, but that's just not the case. It's such an inclusive thing for everybody, because intimate anonymous photographs are more likely to win probably at the end of the day. Something that's just so incredibly creative in an intimate space in an anonymous wood somewhere in the world is just as likely to win, or more likely to win than Torres del Paine, or something like that. So I think is this part of, because I feel that landscape photography has become very polarized, that it's become about ego and popularity and external validation, whereas it's what it can do for us personally, for our self-development, our mental health, which is what I'm going to be talking about on out of Chicago, and just that overall feeling of well-being. And making photographs, our creativity is such a huge part of that. So I feel that this contest is absolutely at the right time as well, because I think there's a fatigue now that's starting to come through, where people have just been overexposed to, and they've lost that ability to trust what they're looking at.
Yeah, and I think it's timed well in a number of ways. Actually, I kind of feel like there's a little bit of a shift happening already, because you have photographers who themselves used to love producing that work, who've actually just moved into more subtle styles. I mean, Alex Noriega, who's one of the judges, is a really good example of that. He's making some absolutely stunning photographs now, but in a very different style to what he was doing before. And you are seeing that gradual shift, which I think is spreading the different approaches that people are taking across. Well, I mean, people are just taking a whole variety of different approaches, which I think they weren't before, when it was even more competitive than it is now. And I think that direction we're already moving in the right direction. And actually YouTube has actually been a fairly positive force in that respect as well. I think there's a lot of variety in approaches in YouTube, but of course, because everybody's going out there with their cameras and recording themselves as part of the vlog, the editing tends to be quite relatable to the viewer. And I think that's brought a bit of momentum in that direction as well. So yeah, maybe we're riding a wave here.
Here's an interesting point that's been a bit troubling in my mind, which is there's an essence of competitiveness has come into landscape photography, where impact sells. It used to be composition is king. Now it's contrast is king. It's the phantasmagoria of processing is king. And I think competition has had a negative impact on the authenticity of landscape photography, and perhaps it becomes a bit of an ego-driven thing, and it becomes a competitive thing. And when I was first asked to be involved, because part of my big spiel through my own education work is that external judgment is not necessary. That we don't need external judgment, because it's a self-validating experience as being creative and making images for ourselves. And one of the big sort of, not a stumbling block, but the sort of slight moral dilemma for me was, it's about judging. We're submitting images to a contest to be judged. And, is there a fine line between that we walk through this? I guess the way I rationalized it to myself was that the people who are submitting their images are asking them to be judged in a way. So, I think that was the way I kind of rationalized it to a certain extent. But does art and judgment and competition, can they exist in the same space?
Matt?
Oh, I was going to hope Tim was going to take this one, but I guess one thing I was going to add is one of the things that early on we had discussed was, and we're not going to do it this year just because it's our first year and we want to keep things as relatively as simple as possible. But one of our goals for the future for the competition is to actually provide a mechanism by which people submitting their images can get feedback from the judges, whether that be like a short paragraph or, just some, hey, your image didn't win, but here are some things that we think you could do to improve your image. Take a look at, the corners over here, or maybe the color cast, or whatever is the judge that they select to critique their image decides to provide feedback on. I think that's an important piece of learning and growth as a photographer and as an artist. But I think, to your point, submitting your images to a competition, in some ways that can be that feedback loop. Like, am I on the right track? Is my art growing? Am I growing as an artist? Is my work up to those standards yet? And I've entered quite a few competitions over the years, and I know Rajesh has probably entered about 1 billion of them, which is why we love having him on our team, because he can give us a lot of feedback on different things that work or don't work. But one of my primary motivations for entering competitions was never to win it. I never really thought I could win some of these competitions, but I always wanted to know, roughly like, where do I stand? What can I improve on? What are the areas in which my work relates to other people? So I think that's one way that competitions can be helpful for photographers. But I think also, and I think Tim would probably touch on this a little bit, but when you think about it, we're constantly competing as artists, whether we think we are or not. When you want to have your images in an exhibition, you're submitting them and someone's saying whether or not they're going to get in the exhibition or not. When you're putting your work online and people see it, you're competing for eyeballs constantly. So I think if you want your work to be seen, it is a competition to some degree. Now, obviously, who likes what is different. So like, someone might really like my work, but other people might really think it sucks. That's okay, right? I think this competition is really about elevating the style of photography and the visions and the originality and things of that nature that we want to see rise to the top and be celebrated. What would you add to that, Tim?
Yeah, I think it's difficult unless you are an artist who doesn't show your work to anybody ever. You care what people think in some fashion. The important thing is that you choose who you care, and that's the key differentiator. I don't go out there and if I put something on social media, I don't really judge it essentially by how many likes it gets. But if certain people I respect leave a comment, that means something. It means a lot more to get one comment from somebody I respect than it does to get 1,000 likes and shares, etc. And that's partly another reason behind the competition. You try and get the judges that can give the work the thought it requires. And the other thing we're doing with the competition is to try to make people understand that it is a subjective choice.
Of course.
So the way we're doing that is by having each judge be able to choose their favorites. I think the judges may choose their top 5 pictures or 6 pictures, and we're going to feature those choices in the book as long as we can do it, which I hope we can, and with a bit of narrative about why they like those pictures. And from what I've seen of competitions, it's very rarely unanimous decision about what wins. And so if we can dispel that myth that the winner was actually everybody loved it, it's the best picture. It's not. It just happens to have pleased more people who were judging at that point in time than anybody else. And you put another set of judges in front of them, and it'll be a different decision. What we really want to have, though, is to have the book, which I think the book is the more important tool here, is to show a real collection of, I don't know how many pictures we can get in a book, let's say 100 pictures. And that, to me, says more, because you then have a collection of images that in their entirety show what the judges are interested in, and maybe what the zeitgeist is about that work.
Would you say that in many of the other competitions out there, it's the celebration of the place and the presentation of the place is more important than the introspective artist's relationship with the place? And it seems to me, just from listening to the 4 of you talking about this stuff so far, is that seems to be the main difference, is that the images that we're looking for the book are ultimately, they require the viewer to spend time with them, to immerse themselves in them. It's not, oh, what a beautiful mountain and gorgeous light. It's, there's something here that the artist has seen and experienced and is expressing about themselves as well. And sometimes the subject is not the subject, as it were. It seems to me that my art is certainly heading in that direction. It's way more introspective. It says more about me than it says about a wood in the west of Scotland. Or
I don't know what other people think here, but I do think sometimes you see in a lot of popular photography that composition is a brute force method of throwing subject matter at people, whereas composition should be a way of arranging things in a picture to communicate something. And that's what we really want to celebrate. That's the way. I mean, composition is the core key we can manage as photographers. The choice of where to place things, where to put the camera, how to arrange things in the moment to press the shutter. And those are the tools we have. So if we can use those tools well to arrange everything in the frame, then we've done our job. If we just go to Torres del Paine for 3 weeks, sit in front of a stream with a nice tree and just wait for the right sunset with the right clouds, it doesn't seem to mean anything. The photographer's not telling a story to us. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Tim and I have actually discussed this, because when we were putting together the judging lineup, I sort of said to Tim, hang on a second, are we just going to end up with some strange esoteric winner who's, presenting some body of work that nobody else understands? So I think there is a balance there. I mean, I come from a style of photography that is very illustrative. I mean, I'm not really trying to show myself as some great artist. I just love to show the beauty of nature. That is what I enjoy in photography. And we definitely don't want to rule out people doing that, because that's one of the great things about our medium that we don't want to just discard. But equally, I think that there is a little bit too much of my style of photography, you know, doing well in competitions and being promoted to the fore, because it taps into that mindset of spectacle that so many people respond to, because it's quite immediate. And that's really the advantage of having a group of judges who understand photography on a really deep level. So, you know, we don't have a panel of judges that are all producing this impactful style of work, which can certainly happen in some other competitions. And hopefully then they'll be able to see the depth in the work, you know, that some of the ideas coming through. And certainly we have this project category too, where that kind of concept should come forward even more.
Yeah. The one thing I would like to add to that is, like, going back to the first question that you asked, why do we have another competition? A lot of competitions out there, not all of the judges are experts in the genre. Not everybody in a photo contest or a landscape photographer. Some could be a news reporter type of photographer, or somebody could be a wildlife photographer, even a fashion photographer. This is the only competition that I believe we have put together that has everybody on the judging panel an expert in nature and landscape photography. And that is very important to us and very valuable to our audience.
The one thing I was going to add to tie into what Alex had said was we actually spent a lot of time and intention around choosing the categories for the competition, because we recognize that certain styles have kind of risen to the top of everyone's attention. Like, you know, aerial work right now is super popular, which rightfully so, you know, unique vantages, and it's kind of fresh and it's new and it's surprising. Totally get that. But typically also in addition to that, we see a lot of people winning with just, you know, like the style of work that Alex and I do mostly, which is like kind of like grand, scenic, you know, beautiful, illustrative view of an amazing moment in time from a mountaintop or something like that. And so we wanted to create categories that allowed room for other subgenres of landscape photography to be celebrated, such as, you know, intimate and abstract, as well as night photography. We do have a separate aerial category, and we have a separate grand scenic as well. So, and then I think one of the, I wanted to what Alex said a little bit more around the project submission, because I think that's a pretty unique proposition for a competition as well. We really want to see some really unique project submissions, which is basically 6 to 10 photos around a single theme. And we're really leaving it up to the photographer to come up with that theme. It could be very, you know, it could be very concrete, or it could be more abstract, but we're really excited to see what some of those project submissions are, because that's another interesting way to tie together work. You know, it's kind of similar to Brooks Jensen and Seeing in Sixes and that kind of idea, but we're excited to see what comes across there. So we've definitely, hopefully, put a lot of great thought into how we organize the categories, and we want to give space for all different types of styles to be celebrated.
Yeah, and you know, one thing I'd like to add is I think the website looks fantastic. You know, because it wasn't that long ago that Tim kind of approached me and we started talking about the whole thing, and the next minute, you know, you've got this incredible website up that just looks so good, and it's clear. You know, I think there's a huge breadth of experience in you four, and then there seems to be a huge breadth of experience in the judging panel also. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of years been thrown into this, you know, apart, well, Alex is just a youth, of course, but you know,
I'm an old soul.
He makes up for it with his dashing good looks.
It is, we are quite lucky in a way that I can't think of many people who could get together and have this similar set of complementary skills to do something like this.
Right.
You know, with a range of contacts we've got, and still have a similar approach. So yeah, I think
it strikes me as a project that's been brought together with a very, very strong sense of integrity and morality. You know, you get the sense, looking at some of the other contests around the world, as if they're just money-making exercises. Someone's making a ton of money out of them, whereas this, it genuinely feels that it's coming from a good place. And there seems to be a very highly tuned sense of awareness as to the zeitgeist of contemporary landscape photography and the challenges. And this seems to be very much sort of going up against the status quo of that kind of, well, everything is that way, therefore we might as well just have another contest that celebrates, that type of thing because it's the way to make some cash. But there seems to be a really strong sense of integrity in this, and that sits well with me because I like to think of myself as someone whose business is driven by those same parameters. I could make an awful lot more money by doing horrible things or more popular things, but it's about doing what I consider to be the right thing. So I think you should be applauded for that too.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that's something we all four share in common in terms of our values, that early on, we all agreed that if this makes no money, if it breaks even, then we're super happy. Obviously, if we get 1 million submissions, that would be super awesome, because I think that will produce an even higher quality end product and will allow us to do more with the competition in terms of giving back to the community and really pushing the direction of photography in the way that we want to see it. I think that's what's been most important for the four of us, not to speak for all of us, but we're all in very tight agreement that our motivation around this is really around community building and pushing the art form of landscape and nature photography in a direction that we all value.
Yeah, and I think we're all pretty entrenched in those communities as well. I mean, I think we all feel so part of our various photography communities that there was no way that we were ever going to produce a competition that wasn't trying to work for that community, right. In some way. I think we feel quite a strong sense of duty to that community. And one of the nice things actually has been that a lot of people have actually been commenting on our posts announcing the competition, saying things like, I don't care if I win, I'm just entering because I want to see more of this kind of thing, right. Which is really encouraging to see.
Yeah, we should say as well that we aren't making any money for ourselves in the first year at all, apart from covering actual costs, as in out-of-pocket expenditure. We're not getting paid for our time, and we're not taking any money at the end. If it does make money at the end, that'll get rolled into the following year to ensure that works, and a better book, etc.
Great. Well, and on that note, as far as I was concerned, we weren't getting paid. And everyone I've spoken to who I know who's on the panel, it was just like, I'm honored to be part of this. So again,
you're not going to get paid fairly. Get paid, but not fairly.
Well, but at the end of the day, that's not why I'm doing it. So when Tim asked me, he made it quite clear at the time that there was no fee, and it was like, well, that's fine. And when I mentioned it to Adam Gibbs, it was the same deal. It was just
all the judges had the same approach. We wanted to make sure that the competition run, even if we didn't have a huge amount of entries. And it's nice that, it's great that all the judges are happy to agree without a fee because they believe in it as well.
That's right.
When I asked Stefan Forster, he immediately just volunteered, I don't want to be paid. That was before I'd even discussed how it was going to work. So I think it's common with so many of the judges.
That makes me feel really good. I think it's so easy in this day and age to feel. I've been out 3 hours, like I said, in the hill today, and I've just been thinking. Because I was, when you're out on your own and you're just pounding trails, and it's a tough world out there right now. There's an awful lot of challenges. There's an awful lot. In the industry, with workshops being cancelled, and struggling to change to online business models and all of this type of stuff. It's been really, really hard, but there is still this deep-rooted love of what we do that is why we do it. I'm really super proud to be involved, and I'm honored to be asked to be involved and to host this little soiree this afternoon.
Yeah,
I hope I don't know if anyone's still watching.
We got to make it more controversial, Alistair.
Okay,
yeah.
Right. Well, we can have an outtake section at the end. So I'm going to mention the word composite to Matt Payne, and say A guaranteed way to set the fireworks flying. Well, thank you very much, guys. It's been awesome. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that any of you feel has to be mentioned? Does everyone feel you've been fairly represented?
Yeah, I think we covered quite a lot there.
So, yeah.
One thing I would just real quickly like to touch on, Alistair, that, you know, viewers of this particular room might be just like, oh, super obvious, like 5 men involved in landscape and nature photography. I think that's another thing that as organizers, we were actually very acutely aware of, and wanted to try to elevate, you know, voices, other women, and also people of color. And so, you know, we're very conscious of that perception. And, you know, we do have 2 women on our judging panel, and we hope in, you know, future years to involve, you know, other individuals of other diverse backgrounds. But it is something that we're very top of mind and aware of, and hope to find other ways to celebrate those individuals in the future.
Great. Super, guys. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you all. Some people I know, some people I'm getting to know better. So it's been a real honor to talk to you guys again. Have a lovely time, and yeah, we will speak again very shortly, I guess.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Alistair.
Alistair.
Thanks for having us.
Cheers,
Yeah,
guys.
thank you.